who came back, Elias Grayson, was found at 3:17 inches in the morning on the shoulder of the old northern road, barefoot, bleeding, and walking toward a town that had already mourned him. The truck driver who saw him at first thought he was an animal, a pale shape moving through the rain. The road cut through the edge of black pine forest where the trees grew so tall and close together that even daylight had to fight its way through. At night, the forest became a single black wall beside the road, breathing mist across the asphalt. Elias walked out of that darkness, wearing the torn remains of his ranger uniform. No coat, no shoes, no memory. When the police asked him where he had been for the last 6 months, he looked past them toward the trees and said only one thing. It called my name. By sunrise, the whole town knew. By noon, Clara Grayson was standing in the hospital hallway, unable to move. For 6 months, she had imagined this moment so many times that it no longer felt real. In some versions, Elias came home smiling, thin, but alive, and she ran into his arms. In others, he came back wounded and broken, but still himself. She had never imagined him like this. He sat on the hospital bed with his back straight, hands resting neatly on his knees, eyes fixed on the window. His dark hair had grown to his shoulders. His face was thinner, his cheeks hollow, his skin marked with scratches that looked weeks old and hours old at the same time. But it was him. The scar above his eyebrow from a childhood fall, the small bend in his little finger, the wedding ring still on his left hand. Clara covered her mouth and began to cry. Elias slowly turned his head toward her. For one terrible second, his eyes showed no recognition. Then something changed. A softness returned. "Clara," he whispered. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. He was freezing, not cold from rain. Freezing, as if the forest had kept winter inside his bones. She held him anyway. "I looked for you," she sobbed. "Every day. Every single day." Elias rested one hand against her back, but the gesture felt uncertain, almost learned. "I know," he said. Clara pulled away and looked at him. How Elias blinked slowly. Then his gaze drifted back toward the window. "I don't know." The official story began 6 months earlier in October, when a family of 4 disappeared inside Black Pine Forest during a weekend hike. Elias had been part of the rescue team. He knew the forest better than anyone in the county. He had spent 10 years pulling lost children, injured hunters, and drunk tourists out from between those trees. He was calm, capable, practical. He did not believe in ghost stories. On the 3rd night of the search, Elias radioed that he had found something near the old Firewatch trail. Then he vanished. The rescue operation lasted 12 days. They found his backpack near a stream. They found his radio crushed beneath a fallen branch. They found blood on the bark of a black pine tree. But they never found Elias. Clara had refused to hold a funeral. She had stood through every search briefing with red eyes and shaking hands, listening to men explain probability, hypothermia, animal attacks, terrain hazards. But all she heard was this: "Your husband is gone." Now he had returned, and no one knew how. They brought him home 2 days later. Their cottage stood on the western edge of town, where the last houses gave way to fields, and then to the first dark line of black pine forest. Before Elias disappeared, Clara had loved the view. In the mornings, mist rose between the trees like breath from sleeping giants. In autumn, the forest turned gold and rust beneath a silver sky. Now she kept the curtains closed. Elias noticed. "You used to like the light," he said. Clara froze in the kitchen. It was such a small sentence. So ordinary. So much like him that it hurt. "I still do," she lied. Elias stood near the back door, looking through the glass toward the trees. "You don't open this anymore." "No." "Because of me," Clara turned away. "Because of what took you." He said nothing. That first week should have been full of joy. Instead, their house became quiet in a way that frightened her. Elias moved through rooms like a guest, trying not to disturb anything. He would pause in front of photographs for long stretches, studying his own face beside hers, as though trying to understand the man in the frame. At dinner, he sometimes forgot to eat. At night, Clara woke to find him sitting upright in bed, staring into the dark corner of the room. "Elias," she would whisper. He never answered at once. It always took him a moment to return. The doctor said trauma could do strange things to a person. Memory loss, dissociation, night terrors, survivor's guilt. Clara tried to believe them. Then came the first night she heard him speaking in his sleep. Not words exactly, names. Dozens of names whispered in a voice too low to be his. At 2:17 a.m., Clara opened her eyes. The bedroom was dark, except for the pale moonlight behind the curtains. Elias lay beside her, on his back, eyes open, lips moving. She leaned closer. Elias. His mouth continued to move. At first she thought he was praying. Then she heard her own name. Clara. She touched his shoulder. His skin was ice cold. His eyes snapped toward her. For a moment she did not recognize the expression on his face. It was fear. Pure, childlike fear. Did you hear it? He whispered. Hear what? Elias turned slowly toward the window. Someone outside whispered his name. Elias. Clara went still. The voice was faint, almost hidden beneath the wind, but it was there. Soft, patient, calling from the direction of the forest. She got out of bed and crossed to the window before Elias could stop her. Her hand trembled as she pulled the curtain aside. The backyard was empty. Beyond the fence, the field stretched silver under moonlight. Farther back, black pine forest stood motionless. No people, no movement, no voice. Clara let the curtain fall. There's no one there. Elias looked at her with hollow eyes. There is. The next morning, Clara checked the security camera footage. For almost an hour after midnight, the backyard remained empty. Then at 2:17, the camera flickered. Static rippled across the screen. When the image returned, Elias was standing outside in the yard, barefoot, wearing only his sleep shirt and trousers, facing the forest. Clara's breath caught. She looked toward the hallway where Elias sat silently at the kitchen table, then back at the screen. On the footage, he stood completely still for 43 minutes. Then he raised one hand and waved at the trees. Clara stopped the video. She could not make herself watch more. That afternoon, Martin Vale came to the house. He had been Elias's partner on the rescue team. A broad, tired man in his 40s with a gray beard and the heavy eyes of someone who had not slept properly since October. When Clara opened the door, Martin removed his hat. I heard he was home. He is. Martin looked past her into the house. I need to see him. Clara hesitated, then let him in. Elias was in the sitting room, standing before the mirror above the fireplace. He was not checking his appearance. He was smiling, then stopping, then smiling again, as if practicing. Martin saw this and went pale. Elias turned. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. Then Martin backed away. No, he whispered. Clara frowned. What's wrong? Martin's eyes filled with a terror so sudden and deep that Clara felt it in her own chest. We buried you. The room seemed to lose all sound. Elias stared at him. What did you say? Martin shook his head slowly. We found you. Clara gripped the back of a chair. No, you didn't. They never found him. Martin swallowed hard. They didn't tell the public. They didn't want panic. But we found a body 3 weeks after the search ended. Burned badly. Animals had been at it. His voice broke. But the uniform was yours. The ring was yours. Clara looked down at Elias's hand. His wedding ring gleamed faintly. Martin whispered. Your dental records matched. Elias took one step toward him. Martin flinched. That hurt Clara more than anything. Get out, she said. Martin did not argue. But before leaving, he looked at Clara with desperate warning in his eyes. Whatever came back from those woods, he whispered. Don't assume it came back alone. That night, Elias disappeared. Clara woke before dawn to an empty bed and the back door standing open. Cold air filled the house. She ran outside barefoot, calling his name, but the yard was empty. Wet grass clung to her feet as she stumbled toward the fence. Then she saw him. Elias stood at the edge of black pine forest. His back was to her. The trees beyond him were wrapped in mist. But he was not alone. Between the trunks stood figures, at least 7 of them. Tall, still, watching. Clara screamed his name. Elias slowly turned. For one moment his face looked almost peaceful. Then he collapsed. When Clara reached him, the figures among the trees were gone. Later, when Elias woke inside the house, he remembered nothing. But there was dirt beneath his fingernails, and blood on his palms. Not his blood. Clara cleaned his hands without speaking. Elias watched her with unbearable sadness. I think something happened to me out there, he whispered. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You came home. Elias looked toward the closed curtains. No, he said quietly. I think something followed me home. That evening, snow began to fall over Willowbrook County, though winter was still weeks away. Elias stood alone in the yard, after Clara had gone to sleep, staring into the forest as white flakes settled in his dark hair. He did not remember walking outside. He did not remember opening the gate. He only became aware again when he found himself deep among the black pines, barefoot in the snow, surrounded by trees that seemed far taller than they had any right to be. His breath trembled in the cold. "Clara!" he shouted. The forest swallowed her name. No answer came. Then something scraped against bark behind him. Elias turned. On the trunk of the nearest tree, fresh letters had been carved deep into the wood. The sap ran black. "You should have stayed dead." And from somewhere deeper in the forest, 100 voices whispered his name at once. Elias. The things wearing human skin. Elias. The voices came from everywhere. From behind the trees, from beneath the snow, from the dark spaces between the black pines where no moonlight could enter. Elias stood barefoot in the frozen forest, staring at the words carved into the trunk before him. "You should have stayed dead." The black sap slid slowly down the bark like blood. He tried to call for Clara again, but his voice failed him. The cold had entered too deeply. It was inside his lungs, now inside his bones, inside the hollow places where his memory should have been. Then something moved between the trees. Not an animal. Too tall. Too still. A figure stood about 30 feet away, half hidden behind a pine trunk. Elias could not see its face, only the shape of a human body facing him. "Hello," he called. The figure did not answer. Another appeared to his left, then another, and another. Soon there were 7 of them standing in a loose circle among the trees. None of them moved closer. None of them moved at all. They simply watched. Elias backed away slowly. His heel struck a root, and he nearly fell. When he looked down, the snow around his feet was stained red. His feet were bleeding, but he felt no pain. That frightened him more than the figures. He turned and ran. Branches clawed at his face. Snow burned beneath his feet. The forest twisted around him, every tree looking the same, every shadow hiding another watcher. Behind him, the voices continued whispering his name, gentle and patient, as if they knew he would eventually stop. By dawn, Clara found him at the edge of the field behind their cottage. He was on his knees in the snow, staring at the house like he did not understand what it was. She ran to him with a blanket around her shoulders. "Elias." He looked up slowly. For a moment, his eyes were not his own. Then he collapsed into her arms. That morning, Clara called Dr. Havel, the physician who had treated Elias after his return. The doctor arrived before noon, driving carefully through the thin white snow that had no reason to exist this early in the season. He examined Elias in the sitting room while Clara stood by the window with her arms folded tight across her chest. "His temperature is dangerously low," Dr. Havel said quietly. "But he's alive." "Yes." The doctor did not sound certain. Elias sat silently in the armchair, wrapped in 2 blankets, watching the doctor move around him. Dr. Havel shone a light into his eyes. Elias did not blink. The doctor's hand paused. "Elias," he said carefully, "do you remember going outside last night?" "No." "Do you remember the forest?" Elias's gaze shifted toward the closed curtains. "I remember it remembering me." Dr. Havel looked at Clara. She looked away first. After the doctor left, Elias remained in the sitting room for hours without speaking. Clara made tea that neither of them drank. The cottage felt smaller than before, as though the forest had leaned closer during the night. By evening, Elias finally stood. "I need to go to the station." Clara looked up. "The ranger station." He nodded. "No." "Clara." "No." Her voice broke. "You went into those woods and disappeared for 6 months. Last night you walked into them again, like something had tied a rope around your neck. You are not going back." Elias crossed the room and knelt in front of her. His hands were cold around hers. "I need to know what happened to me." Clara stared at him through tears. "And what if knowing takes you away again?" He had no answer. The ranger station sat 2 miles outside town, near the southern trailhead of Black Pine Forest. It was a low stone building with green shutters, old maps pinned to the walls, and a radio room that still smelled faintly of coffee and wet wool. Martin Vale was there when they arrived. He stood from his desk the moment he saw Elias. "What are you doing here?" Elias stepped inside slowly. "I need the recording." Martin's expression hardened. "No. Martin. No." His voice shook with anger now. You don't get to walk in here wearing his face and ask me for anything. Clara flinched. Elias said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "You think I'm not him?" Martin stared at him with red eyes. "I watched them zip your body into a bag." The room went silent. Snow tapped softly against the windows. Elias looked down at his hands. "I don't know what I am," he said. "But I remember loving my wife. I remember this station. I remember your daughter's name is Elise, and you keep her drawing in the second drawer because you're embarrassed by how much it makes you cry." Martin's face changed. Elias continued. "I remember you saved my life in 2019 when the ridge gave way near Hollow Creek. You broke 2 ribs pulling me out." Martin looked away. Pain passed through him like weather. Clara's voice softened. "Please, if there is anything that can help us understand." For a long time, Martin said nothing. Then he walked to the radio room. The final recording had been archived on an old digital drive. Martin connected it to the computer with trembling hands. "This was from the night he disappeared," he said. Elias did not correct him. The audio began with static. Then Elias's voice came through distant and strained. "Search Team 3, this is Grayson. I've got tracks north of the Firewatch Trail. Small footprints. Maybe one of the children." Martin's recorded voice answered. "Copy that. Hold position. We're 20 minutes out." Static. Then Elias again. "There's someone singing." Clara looked at Elias. His face had gone pale. On the recording, a faint melody drifted beneath the static. Not a song exactly. A pattern of notes. High, soft, wrong. Elias whispered, "I heard that last night." The recording continued. "Search Team 3, disregard. I see them. I see the family." Martin leaned closer to the speaker. Then from the recording, another Elias spoke. Clearer, closer to the microphone. "Martin, don't come in here." The real Martin stiffened. On the recording, Martin's younger voice said, "Elias, what do you mean?" Then came another voice. Also, Elias, but farther away. "Martin, that's not me." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. The 2 identical voices overlapped. One close, one distant, one calm, one terrified. The terrified voice screamed, "That's not Elias." The recording broke into static. Then came screaming. Not one man. Several. Elias grabbed the edge of the desk as if the floor had tilted beneath him. Images tore through his mind. Rain. Pine needles. A child's red mitten caught on a branch. The missing family standing in a clearing, smiling with empty eyes. Martin reaching for him. Something wearing his own face, stepping from behind a tree. Then fire. So much fire. Elias staggered backward. Clara caught him. "What did you see?" He pressed both hands to his head. "There were 2 of me." Martin shut off the recording. His face looked 10 years older. "There was a woman who came during the search," he said quietly. "Old woman from the northern village. She told us to stop looking." Clara frowned. "Why?" Martin swallowed. "She said Black Pine doesn't lose people. It keeps them until it learns them." Elias looked up. "What does that mean?" Martin opened a locked drawer and removed a folded newspaper clipping and a handwritten note. She called them Hollow Ones. The words seemed to darken the room. Clara read the note with shaking hands. The old legend said the forest was older than the towns around it, older than the church roads, older than the names on the maps. People entered Black Pine and sometimes returned, but not always correctly. The Hollow Ones did not steal bodies. They studied grief. They listened to names called by mothers, wives, brothers, rescue teams. Then they answered. They wore the shape of the missing. They wore their voices. And over time, if they stayed close enough to the people who loved the dead, they learned the rest. Memory, habit, tenderness, desire, even love. Elias whispered, "No." Clara dropped the paper. "No. This is folklore. This is madness." Martin looked at Elias. "We burned the body because it was already changing." Elias went still. What Martin's voice became barely audible. "The thing we found in your uniform, it wasn't fully dead." Clara backed away from both men. Elias turned toward her, and the hurt in his face was so human that it nearly destroyed her. Clara. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to hold him. But Martin's words had entered the room like poison. What if grief had made her embrace something that was not her husband? That night, Clara slept on the sofa. Elias did not sleep at all. Near midnight, she woke to find him standing before the hallway mirror. He leaned close to his reflection. Very slowly, he smiled, then frowned, then whispered, "I am Elias Grayson." His reflection smiled back, a second too late. Clara covered her mouth to keep from gasping. At 2:17 a.m., the knocking began. Not at the door, at the windows. Every window in the cottage. Soft knuckles tapping glass from outside. Tap, tap, tap. Elias turned. Clara sat up trembling. The curtains were closed, but shadows stood behind them. Human shapes, one at each window. A voice outside whispered in Clara's voice, "Elias." Then another voice whispered in Martin's, "Come back." Then Elias's own voice joined them from the dark beyond the glass. "You were easier to copy than the others." Elias stepped toward the back window before Clara could stop him. He pulled the curtain aside. Outside, at the edge of the yard, stood another Elias, barefoot in the snow, smiling. Behind him, between the black pine trees, dozens of tall, motionless figures watched the house. The thing wearing Elias's face lifted one hand, and Clara heard it speak without moving its mouth. "Now let us learn her. The forest never gives them back. Now let us learn her." The words entered Clara's mind without sound. She stood frozen behind the window, staring at the thing in the yard, wearing her husband's face. Snow fell between them, in slow white pieces. Behind that other Elias, the black pines stood still beneath the moon, and among them waited the tall figures. Dozens of them. Some were shaped like people. Some were almost people. And some had not learned enough yet. Elias pulled the curtain shut so violently the rail tore from the wall. Clara screamed. The shadows outside moved closer. Every window in the cottage began to shake. Tap, tap, tap. Knuckles against glass. Then voices. Her mother's voice. Clara opened the door. Martin's voice. "It's safe now." A child's voice she did not know. "Please, I'm cold." Then Elias's voice from outside, soft and wounded. "Don't you want the real me back?" Clara covered her ears, but the voices did not come through the air. They came from memory, from grief, from every weak place inside her heart. Elias stood in the center of the room trembling. His face had gone pale in the firelight. "Clara," he said, "listen to me." She looked at him, terrified of what she might see. For a moment he seemed more broken than monstrous. His eyes were filled with pain, confusion, and something almost human enough to destroy her. "If I tell you to run," he whispered, "you run." The front door handle turned slowly. Clara backed away. "It's locked," she said. The handle kept turning. Wood cracked around the frame. Elias walked toward the fireplace and grabbed the iron poker. His hand shook. Not from fear. From effort. His skin near the wrist had begun to split. Thin, dark lines opened beneath the surface as if something inside him had been stitched together poorly and was now coming undone. Clara saw it. So did he. He pulled his sleeve down. "Don't look at that. What's happening to you?" Elias swallowed. "I think I'm remembering too much." The front door exploded inward. Cold air rushed through the cottage. Snow blew across the floor. The other Elias stood outside the doorway smiling. He looked perfect. Too perfect. No scars out of place. No trembling hands. No sorrow in the eyes. A copy made without guilt. "Clara," it said gently. "He is the mistake." The Elias beside her raised the iron poker. The thing at the door tilted its head. "You feel it, don't you?" it said. "He is falling apart. He was not meant to last this long." Clara looked at her husband. Or the thing that had come home as him. His breathing was ragged now. The other Elias stepped inside. The fire dimmed. Behind him more figures gathered at the door. A woman with no eyes. A man whose mouth smiled too widely. A small child with Clara's dead father's voice whispering her name. Elias lunged. The two bodies collided in the doorway. Clara screamed as they crashed into the wall. The mirror shattered. One Elias struck the other with impossible force, but she could not tell which was which for one terrifying second. Then the one she loved turned toward her. "Run," Clara ran. She grabbed her coat from the chair and fled through the back door into the snow. Behind her, the cottage filled with screaming that did not belong to any human throat. She crossed the yard barefoot, cutting her feet on frozen stones, and reached the fence before looking back. Elias burst from the house after her. The right one. She knew before he spoke. Because pain followed him. Because love made him slower. because he looked at her not like something studying prey, but like a man terrified he would lose the only thing still keeping him human. "This way," he shouted. They ran toward Martinvale's house. The town below lay asleep beneath falling snow, unaware that the forest had crossed into it. Streetlights flickered as Clara and Elias stumbled down the road. In the windows of dark houses, shadows began to appear. People standing inside rooms, watching. Clara saw Mrs. Alden from the bakery pressed against her upstairs window, smiling though her eyes were black. At the petrol station, a man stood beneath the broken sign wearing Martin's face. Then another Martin appeared beside him. Then another. Clara nearly fell. Elias caught her. "Don't look at them. They're everywhere. They're learning faster." Martin opened his door before they reached it, shotgun in hand. His face changed when he saw Elias. Then he saw the figures in the road behind them. Inside. Now! They slammed the door and locked it. Martin's house smelled of old tobacco, coffee, and gun oil. Maps of black pine forest covered one wall marked with red pins from years of disappearances. Clara had never seen so many. Martin saw her looking. It's been happening longer than anyone admits. Elias leaned against the table, struggling to stand. Dark cracks had spread up his neck. Clara reached toward him, but he stepped away. "Don't." Her eyes filled with tears. "Elias." He shook his head. "I need you to hear this while I can still say it right." Martin lowered the shotgun. Elias looked at the map. They don't just copy bodies. They copy attachment. The stronger the love, the better the shape holds. Clara whispered, "How do you know that Elias touched his chest?" "Because I can feel him." The room went silent. "The real Elias," he said. "He's still in me somehow. Not alive, not trapped exactly. More like memory with a heartbeat." Clara began to cry. "I don't care what you are." Elias looked at her with unbearable tenderness. "I know. That's why they want you." Outside voices gathered around the house. Hundreds now. Every voice Clara had ever known. Every person Martin had failed to save. Every missing hiker. Every dead friend. The windows fogged from the outside. Words appeared on the glass. "Open." Martin stepped toward the map and pointed to a black circle near the center of the forest. "The old burn site," he said. "That's where we found the body." Elias nodded. "That's where it began for me." "No," Martin said. "That's where it ends." Clara understood before either man said it. "You're going back." Elias would not meet her eyes. "If I can lead them deeper, away from town." "No. They follow me because I'm unfinished." "No. Clara." She struck him across the chest with both hands. "You don't get to come back just to leave me again." The pain in his face almost made him human enough to stay. Almost. But outside, a child began screaming in Mrs. Alden's voice. Then a dog howled. Then glass broke somewhere down the street. The forest was learning the town. Elias placed his cold hand against Clara's cheek. "I remember our wedding." She shut her eyes. "Stop. It rained all morning. You were furious because your shoes sank in the churchyard mud." A sob escaped her. "And you laughed," he whispered. "You laughed so hard you cried." "That was him," Clara said. Elias shook his head. "It's mine now too." For a brief moment Clara saw the truth. He was not Elias. Not fully. But neither was he empty. Whatever had come back from Black Pine had been shaped by a dead man's love, until love itself became a kind of soul. Martin drove them to the forest in his old truck. The road vanished beneath snow. Behind them the town flickered with failing lights. Ahead, Black Pine rose like a wall built from night. At the trailhead, the figures were waiting. Hundreds of them stood between the trees. Silent. Motionless. Elias stepped out first. The forest reacted. Branches shifted, though there was no wind. The figures turned their heads at once. Clara followed him. Martin tried to stop her, but she pulled free. "I'm not letting him go alone." Elias looked back. For the first time all night, he smiled like himself. Together they walked into Black Pine. The deeper they went, the less real the world became. Snow stopped falling. The air turned warm and wet. Voices whispered from every direction, offering memories Clara had never spoken aloud. Her first kiss with Elias. The night they lost their unborn child. The morning she almost removed her wedding ring because hope had become too heavy to wear. The forest knew everything now. At the old burn site, they found the body. Elias's real body lay beneath a black pine tree, half buried in ash and roots, wearing the remains of a ranger uniform. Clara collapsed beside it. For 6 months she had prayed for a body. Now she wished she had never seen it. Elias stood above his own corpse, shaking. The hollow ones gathered in a wide circle. The other Elias stepped forward. "You cannot be them," it said. "You can only wear them." Elias looked at Clara, then at the corpse, then at the forest. "No," he whispered. "You can become what you choose to protect." He knelt and placed his hand on the dead man's chest. The forest screamed. Every tree bent inward. Every hollow one opened its mouth at once. Elias began to burn with pale light, not fire, but memory. Clara saw everything inside him, fear, death, confusion, her face, their wedding, the empty months, the longing to be real. He looked at her one last time. "I love you," he said. Clara sobbed. "I know." The light exploded through the forest. When Clara woke, it was morning. She lay at the edge of black pine, wrapped in Martin's coat. The snow had melted. Birds called softly from the trees. Elias was gone. So were the figures. For months, no one disappeared in Black Pine Forest. Clara kept living. Not well, but honestly, she buried Elias beneath the hill behind the church, though sometimes she wondered which Elias she had buried the dead man found in the woods, or the one who had loved her enough to leave. Then, on the first winter night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Clara woke to a soft knock at the window. Tap, tap, tap. She opened her eyes. The bedroom was dark. Slowly she turned toward the glass. Outside, Elias stood in the snow, smiling. Behind him, between the black pine trees, dozens of motionless figures watched the house, and this time when the voice whispered her name, it sounded almost like love.